Hello friends, today I'm going to show you how I make homemade noodles. This is my grandma's recipe. I am half Italian, so I love Italian food. I love pasta, and honestly, doesn't matter if you have zero Italian in you. If you like any kind of noodles, you've never tasted noodles until you've tasted homemade, and they are not hard to do. Trust me on this. You do not even need a pasta machine to make them if you don't have one. So all it takes, as the recipe says, for each batch is 2 cups of flour and 2 eggs. Now I slightly beat those eggs, not beat them, but just slightly whisk them in a separate cup or bowl before I dump them in my flour. So I'm going to take this big bowl, add 2 cups of flour. Now I'm going to double my recipe, so I'm going to use 4 cups of flour and 4 eggs. So it's basically 1 egg for every 1 cup of flour, and then a 1/3 cup of water for each batch. So it would be a 1/6 cup of water if you just wanted to make a very small batch, and only use 1 cup of flour and 1 egg. And what I will try to do is I will have the recipe in the more information box below, and what I will do is I will try to figure out an easier way to manage that 1/3. I'll split it and put it into like tablespoons or something for you. So if you just want to make one quick batch just to try it out and see how it turns out, you can do that. So then now I do have a pasta machine. My grandma gifted this to me several years ago, before she passed away, and I was the only one that didn't have one in the family, and this is the one she bought me. It is from Villaware, and it's just one that you clamp onto your counter, and it's a hand crank machine. Very easy to use. It only has 2 different types, like a fettuccine type slice, and then this is just like your regular spaghetti slice. Now, like I said, you don't have to have a pasta machine. I use this one. I love it. But I will give you some tips later in the video on, if you don't have a pasta machine at all, what you can do instead. And if I can find this one or something similar, I will link it below also. Okay, so you want to get started. Like I said, you want your 1/3 cup water, your flour, and your eggs if you're making just the one regular batch. And then you also want a hard, clean surface to put your pasta on once it's all been cut, to dry out for a while. I don't have a specific amount of time that I dry it without fail. I would say that you probably minimally want it for about a half hour. So if you were running behind and you needed pasta for that evening, and you were going to make a batch, but then you needed to start cooking dinner, you would want a good half hour for it to sit and rest after you cut it, before you popped it in the boiling water. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and because my lighting is terrible, and I do apologize for that, and this counter is extremely small. I'll back up a little bit. This counter that I'm working on is extremely small, so it would be very hard to put my tripod on here and have you actually watch me mix it. But what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm doubling this recipe. So I'm putting in 4 cups of flour, 4 eggs, and it'll end up being 1 cup of water for me into this bowl. And then once I start stirring it up, I'll stop and I'll show you the next step. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I thought I'd show you first, before this got totally mixed, what it looks like. As you can still see, there's a lot of flour in there, but what you also want to make sure that you're doing is scraping the flour from the very bottom of your bowl and, you know, around the sides. Make sure you get all that and get it all combined. Now, I also believe I made a mistake when I was telling you how much I was going to be making. I am making a triple batch. So I'm using 6 eggs instead of 2. 6 eggs, 6 cups of flour, and 1 cup of water. I realized that after I shut the camera off that, wait a minute, I said 1 cup of water, but I think I said 4 cups of flour. I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm not trying to confuse you. This is just one basic recipe. You could cut this in half, or you could double it, triple it, quadruple it. It's pretty easy to do, you know, with the amounts for just one batch. So I have in here 6 cups of flour, 6 eggs, and 1 cup of water. And I'm stirring it. I do prefer and recommend to use a good strong wooden spoon, which is what I'm using. And just make sure that you use a bowl big enough. I don't think there's anything wrong with using glass, ceramic, stainless steel like this one is. There's no issues there. So I'm going to get this finished mixing up, and then before I start to knead it, I will come back on and show you how I do that. Okay, so here is my the dough dumped out onto my clean counter. Now, as you can still see, there's a nice amount of flour that needs to get incorporated, but you're only going to get so far by stirring it. Then you're going to have to dump it out and knead this in the rest of the way. Mix it in with, as you're kneading it with your hands. As you can see, my other hand is full of spaghetti dough here. I am going to just go ahead and kind of show you how I do this a little bit. I just kind of keep folding it over itself and then pushing it and folding it over itself. And I'm probably not showing this real good, but you can kind of get the gist of it. You just want to keep folding it over not over yourself, over itself. And just keep doing that. And then once I get mine where it's fully incorporated, I will come back and give you a couple tips on the actual kneading process. And you're not going to knead it for very long, but you do want to do it a few times once that flour is completely mixed in. Okay, so here's my dough that's thoroughly incorporated. All the flour and egg and everything is in there really good. As far as kneading, I might have done a couple passes with it, and what I mean is how I knead, right, wrong, or otherwise. I kind of give it a push, fold it over itself, bring it forward, and then I just keep doing that. Okay, that's how I have always kneaded anything, even while making bread. Now the difference with this, and you can tell this is on the sticky side. It's not, I mean, all right, I put my hand on it, that's what I get. So I'm not like, you know, it's not like I can't pick it up at all without just getting a glob. But it's not dry, and it really shouldn't be. It shouldn't be wet though either. Now see, pulling it, it is sticking to the counter. Okay, it is sticking to the counter, but it's pulling off easily. Okay, so what you want to do is knead it for maybe just a minute. Once you get it fully incorporated, just knead it just for a minute, maybe 2, and that's it. It does not have to become silky smooth. As a matter of fact, you don't want it to. You don't want it to become silky smooth like if you were to watch someone knead the dough for baking bread. It becomes all silky and smooth and everything. That's because of the yeast in it also. This is what I like to call a rough dough. It's supposed to be have that rustic look to it, I guess. Then once you're fully, once you've done your kneading for 1 to 2 minutes, you want to take a wet or damp towel, and I use a flour sack. That's the best thing to use for this. Wrap it around the dough and let it sit for 10 minutes. So that's what I'm going to do now, and then I'll be back and show you how I use my pasta machine and what you can do to cut your dough if you do not have a pasta machine. Okay, so I know you probably cannot see me very much, maybe my hands, I'm not even sure. But I'm pretty sure you can see my counter. And what I have done is I've put a nice, thin layer of flour all over. I have also taken my spaghetti dough out of the damp flour sack, and I've cut a few chunks off. Now, this is the reason you do not want, even if it is a little bit on the sticky side, you don't want to add more flour to your dough while you're mixing it or kneading it. Because now, to cut it, whether you use a machine or your stand mixer, if you have an attachment on that cuts pasta, however way you do it, now you're going to need to use a little bit of flour. And if you added more flour again, you're going to end up with a tougher dough and a tougher spaghetti, and you don't want that. You want a nice tender spaghetti. So with this machine, I have to cut chunks like this, roll it in here a couple times, and then use whichever cutter, send it through whichever cutter I want. And your process will change depending on the machine you have. If you do not have something like this to use, or a stand-up mixer with an attachment, what you want to do is take out probably the size of maybe 2 chunks, okay, 2 slices, and have a nice thin layer of flour on your counter and roll it out with your rolling pin. Now, how thick, you say? Well, that's up to you. Do you like a thicker spaghetti or a thinner spaghetti? It doesn't matter what size or shape you want it, or how thick. That's personal preference. So you roll it as thin as you want it, and then you can either use a knife and just make strips down. You can make long ones, you can make shorter ones. It's really just up to you. I mean, I guess if you wanted to, you could make little circles and, discs and boil those. I don't know how those would cook, but really, the point is that it's just totally up to you at that point. Now, what I'm going to go ahead and do is run a few of these through the machine. And in case you do get a machine, in case you do get a machine, I am going to show you how this does. Now, that's the first pass. Okay, and not only does this make this thin to go through your preferred cutter, but it also kneads the dough some more, okay, which is crucial to your the process. So there is one pass. Now what I do is I use one pass. This knob has numbers on it, and I am at the number 7, the highest number right now. I pass through my slices one time at a number 7, And then I will pull this out and change it, and I go down to about a 4.5, 4, and I will pass it through again. And I will do this slice. Now you don't want like a lot of flour on it, but you do want just a brushing, and that also helps keep the machine from getting chunks of dough in there, because it's not the easiest thing to have dough stuck in your machine. So then you would take this slice, okay, and I'm going to use, we like the thick, and this just, it is very sticky to me for some reason. Today's dough is not, so I'm just going to lay it in the flour, flip it over, brush it off. Like I said, you don't want too much flour on it. You really don't. Give it a shake. And then change my handle here. Oops. Got to kind of push it in there just a bit to get it going, and then it'll catch. And I'll show you what it looks like once it's cut. Now, that was a long slice. If you're like, there's no way I want to manage those long slices, you can cut them in half. There's no problem with that. This is your pasta. You can do it any way you want. And then what I do is I kind of make sure they're all separate. And then I will go and put them on my clean table to dry. Now, I have also put a thin coating of flour on my table, and I will show you that once I get this all done. But I just lay them in little bunches. You don't want to put too many in one spot. And I know you can't see what I'm doing right now, but I will show you after. I don't want to be picking up the camera and the whole tripod and get you all dizzy, but I'll show you that later. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and continue with the cutting process, and then once I get a nice batch on the table that are already all the way cut, I will come back and show you guys where I'm at. Okay, so I have most of all my dough already cut through the machine, and I hope you guys can see this well. I left a little batch of my dough that I did not send through the machine, and I have covered my counter with some flour and just brushed it onto the top of the dough also, kind of, you know, mashed it down a little bit with my hand. And now I'm going to show you my cutting process if I didn't feel like taking the machine out, or just didn't feel like using it, or for any of you that don't have a machine of any type. Now, the rolling is acting like the first process of sending the dough through the machine. It's giving it that extra kneading that's needed. And then you just want to smooth it out or roll it out until it's the thickness that you prefer. Okay. And I'm going to get this is almost ready. And then I'll show you what I do. And it's really simple. I'm probably a flour-filled mess. I don't know if you can see me at all other than my hands. Hopefully you can see all the dough in the rolling pin. But I look like the Pillsbury Doughboy. Okay, I think that this is good. Now I'm going to take a sharp knife, and I'm just going to cut strips. And I'm not getting fancy about this. I am not, using a ruler and making sure that they're all the same width or whatever. They're not. They're not going to be. And I honestly don't care. Once they're on a plate, all cooked with your choice of sauce on it, it isn't going to matter either. It's just how they taste. So that is pretty much how you would do it. And yep, they are wider than what comes out of the machine. I don't know if you could see, but that is what they're coming out. That's how they look after I just cut them by hand. And, if you wanted them thinner, thicker, or wider, or, wider, thicker, thinner, more narrow, that's totally up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of these. And then I'll be back to show you the table with all the drying noodles on it. So here is my pasta filled table. And it's making me hungry. It is getting late. It's just about time for me to start dinner, and we are going to have these with dinner tonight. Now I'm going to show you the ones that I cut myself, just to show you how I did that process. And that's these over here. You can tell they're definitely a bit thicker and wider compared to these that went through the machine. Okay, so I'll pick one of these up. See that? Definitely wider than something like that. Big difference, big difference. Well, yeah, it is a big difference. But they taste just as good. If you don't have a machine and you need to cut them by hand, I probably could have made the dough a little thinner. That's the only thing I would say. But they're still going to be good. If you want a thicker noodle, go for it like this. There's no problem. The only thing though is, in a pot of water, these are going to take longer than these. So if I cook these with these tonight, I'm going to dump these into that boiling water about 30 seconds before these. So I'll dump those into the boiling water, stir it, wait maybe 20-30 seconds, and then dump these in. And they cook fine though, as long as your water is boiling rapidly. You want it full boiling, and then you put in your noodles and you kind of like shake them in there. You don't want any excess flour either. So what I do is I get a bowl and I come over here and I'll shake out the noodles, put them in a bowl, and then take the bowl over to the stove. You don't want to get excess flour in the water, or they'll just get clumpy and yucky that way. Same thing if you're not cooking them right away once they've dried out. I would say if you're going to want to freeze them, you definitely want to let them dry out for 2 to 3 hours, depending on how damp it is in your house. Good 2 to 3 hours is a safe bet. And then shake them out, put them in a freezer bag, let the air out of the bag, and then zip it up and toss them in the freezer, and you've got them all ready for you whenever you want to take some out. You can use the whole bag. You can just take a handful out to add to some soup or something like that, or for a side dish for one. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If I remember, I will pop in a pic of how they look all cooked. We're not having a pasta dinner tonight. We are having these noodles with chicken sausage, but I will still show you how they look cooked. And next time I will be, or soon anyway, might not be the very next video, but soon I will be making homemade gnocchis. So stay tuned for those. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it, and comment below. Thanks. Bye-bye.